and the people walking through on dry land. You know that Bible story where the waters were parted? You know Charlton Heston, right? You've seen the movie The Ten Commandments? So whenever we think of the waters being parted and the people walking through on the land, we think of the story of Moses parting the Red Sea. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove back the sea with a strong east wind, and it turned into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and a wall of water on their left. That would have been a little scary. That's a test of your faith, right? You're walking through this wall of water on both sides. Like, Lord, keep holding on till I get across. So that's the story we always think about. But you know that's only one of 4 times in the Bible that the waters were parted for people to walk across. And today we're continuing with our study of Elijah and a little bit on also his friend Elisha. And we're going to learn about the parting of the waters. Now there was a guy named Joshua. Joshua was the leader of the Israelites and a military commander. You know, Moses was never allowed to go into the promised land. After wandering 40 years in the desert, Moses never went to the promised land. He went up on a mountain and he died. But Joshua took over, and Joshua led the Israelite people into the promised land, the Holy Land. But they had to cross a river. They had to cross the Jordan River. So look what happened. Now the priest who carried the Ark of the Covenant remained standing in the middle of the Jordan River until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people, just as Moses had directed Joshua. The people hurried over, and as soon as all of them had crossed, the Ark of the Lord and the priest came to the other side while the people watched. The men of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over ready for battle in front of the Israelites as Moses had directed them. About 40,000 armed for battle crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. So they crossed the Jordan River. It was miraculously dried up. And it says they hurried across. I think I would too. I think I'd run across about fast as I could go. But look how many people were there. 40,000. 40,000 soldiers armed for war. And they were going to go across this Jordan River, and they were going to attack the city called Jericho. You know that song, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Well, that's this story right here. Joshua led 40,000 people across the Jordan River, which opened up its ways and dried up for them to go across. Now, we've been studying Elijah, and today's story, Elijah crosses the Jordan River in a miraculous way. 50 men from the company of the prophets went and stood at a distance, facing the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan River. Elijah took his cloak and he rolled it up and he struck the water with it. The water divided to the right and to the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. So Elijah the prophet struck the waters with his cloak, and the waters parted, and him and his protege Elisha crossed on dry ground. So that's the 3rd time that the waters were parted. Then, later in today's story, we'll find out that Elisha did the same thing. Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the cloak that had fallen from Elijah and struck the water with it and said, "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" When he struck the water, it divided to the right and to the left, and he crossed over. So that's 4 times in the Bible that God miraculously parted a body of water for people to cross. Now Jesus himself outdid all these guys. But Jesus was not just a prophet, was he? Jesus was the Son of God. And he outdid all these guys. There was a stormy night on the sea, and Jesus' disciples got on a boat across the Sea of Galilee to get to the other side. And a violent storm came, and they were scared they were going to shipwreck and die. They were seasoned sailors. They were fishermen, some of them. They were used to the waters and the storms, but this storm was really bad. But Jesus had told them, "You guys go across on the boat, and I'll meet you on the other side later." Now, they didn't know what he was talking about. He was having some fun with them. I'll meet you on the other side later. They're scratching their heads. How's he going to get there? So Jesus went up on the mountaintop and prayed. And then he came down, and the storm was blowing, and Jesus didn't part the waters to walk across. What did Jesus do? Y'all are good. Jesus walked on the water. And it's funny, when I was teaching that chapter a few years ago, I noticed something very funny. Jesus was walking on the water, and he was just walking right past the boat. Here's the boat with his disciples. They're afraid of dying, and Jesus just cruising like this, you know? He wasn't even going to stop. But they yelled out, Jesus, help us. And he didn't stop, and he helped them and calmed the sea. That's what Jesus does. He doesn't just part the sea, he calms the sea and brings peace to our hearts when we need it. Now our reading today, here's my Bible. I'm in the 2 Kings chapter 2. 2 Kings chapter 2. Let's see if I can find it here. Here we are. Now this is the story of how Elijah was taken up into heaven. You may have heard that story. Only 2 people in the Bible were taken up to heaven without dying first. That was Enoch, way back in the beginning of Genesis, and Elijah. So this is the story about that. People think Elijah went to heaven in a fiery chariot, but you might find out not quite exactly right when you hear the story. Now when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, alright, taking them up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elijah were on their way from Gilgal. And Elijah said to Elisha, remember Elijah is the older prophet and Elisha is the new one, the younger one that he's training. Elijah said to Elisha, please stay here. So he knows he's going to be taken, but he's telling Elisha, stay here, don't go with me. I'm going to go alone. For the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel. But Elisha said, as the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. Elisha was a dedicated friend. He didn't want to desert his friend Elijah. Sometimes your friends tell you, oh, I don't need your help right now, just leave me alone. But you know better. And if you're a good, faithful friend, you're going to read between the lines a little bit, and you're going to stay there and take care of your friend, right? He says, I will not leave you. So they went down to Bethel. And the sons of the prophets who were in Bethel came out to Elijah and said to him, do you know that today the Lord will take away your master from you? He said, yes, I know it, but keep quiet. So even the prophets that weren't even traveling with Elisha and Elijah, even the prophets in Bethel, God had told them that today Elijah will be taken from us. And they told this to Elisha. Don't you know this is going to happen? And Elisha said, yeah, I know it's going to happen. That's why I'm sticking with him like glue. But don't tell anybody. Be quiet about it. Interesting. And something else I like to notice here. Remember when Elijah said to God at one point, I'm the only prophet left. I'm the only one left in all of Israel. Kind of feeling sorry for himself and bragging on himself a little bit. And God said, no, I got 7,000 more that I can raise up. You're not that important. Well, here there were 50 prophets that God had spoken to. 50. So obviously Elijah wasn't the only one, was he? Sometimes you think you're alone, but you're not. Sometimes you think you're super special and God can't do without you. He can. He can. He'd rather not, but he can. Elijah said to him, Elisha, please stay here. So now they're in Bethel, and once again he's telling Elisha, please stay here, because the Lord is sending me to Jericho. We talked about Jericho today. But Elisha said, as the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. You know, Jesus said, there is a friend that stays closer than a brother. Sometimes your best friend is closer than a brother. Amen? Amen. At least your best friend didn't beat you up when you were a kid, like your brother did. So they came to Jericho. The sons of the prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha. So once again, there's a bunch of prophets in this city. Every city they go to, there's plenty of prophets around. They said to Elisha, "Do you know that today the Lord will take away your master from you?" And Elisha said, "Yes, I know it. Keep quiet." Then Elijah said to Elisha, "Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan River." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. You know what this reminds me of? This is 3 times. 3 times they said, Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here. I got to go somewhere. You stay here." Maybe he just wanted Elisha to be safe. But Elijah wouldn't leave. It reminds me of Peter. Remember when Peter was warming his hands by the fire on the night that Jesus was arrested and beaten and soon to be crucified? And they said to Peter, 3 times they said to Peter, "Aren't you with him? Aren't you one of his?" Peter said, No, I'm not with Jesus. I'm not one of his. And someone asked again, "I thought I saw you with that group of disciples. Aren't you with Jesus?" Like, "No, not me. You got the wrong guy." And this one girl even said, "You have an accent, like a Galilean accent. That's where all these Jesus guys are from. You're one of them, aren't you?" And the 3rd time, Peter said, "No, I never knew him." That was a terrible moment in Peter's life. And later on, when Jesus was resurrected from the dead, he came back to Peter. He said, "Peter, do you love me?" He said, "Yes, Lord, I love you." He said, "Then feed my sheep." And the 2nd time, Jesus said to Peter, "Do you love me?" He says, "Lord, you know I love you." He said, "Then feed my sheep." And the 3rd time, Jesus said to Peter, "Do you love me?" He says, "Yes, Lord. Damn it, I love you." Maybe not in those words. Peter has a pretty rough guy, so I think it probably fits. And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." So 3 times Peter denied Jesus. Then 3 times Jesus spoke to him of love. How forgiving Jesus is. How wonderful that he forgives. And I don't care what you've done in your life. Some of you here have done some pretty bad things in your life, like I have. I'll tell you one thing right now. God forgives you if you just say yes and receive his forgiveness. There's nothing that can't be forgiven by the blood of Jesus. So here's Elisha 3 times, sticking with Elijah, sticking with his friend, being a faithful friend. All right, let's see kind of where I was here now. All right, so they went to the Jordan River, and they went on, and at the Jordan River there were 50 more prophets hanging out there. They went and stood at a distance from them as they both were standing by the Jordan. So here's Elisha and Elijah standing by the Jordan River, and there's 50 prophets off in the distance watching them. Then Elijah took his cloak and he rolled it up and he struck the water, and the water was parted to one side and to the other side, and the 2 of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken." So Elijah's saying to his protege, Elisha, he's saying, "Look, I'm about to be taken away by God. What would you like? What's the one request? What is your one wish that I could grant you before I leave?" Well, that's a pretty big question. What would you say if some spiritual master like Elijah said, "What's your one wish?" What would you say to God? What is your one wish in your life? That'd be a little hard to answer maybe, huh? You know what they say, we all want to go to heaven, we just don't want to go right now. So he gave him this option. Here's what Elijah asked for. "Please give me a double portion of your spirit." He wanted a double portion of the spirit of Elijah, which of course Elijah was full of the Spirit of God. He wanted a double portion. That's scary to ask for that. You know how scary it is to get really close to God? You know how scary it is to let go of everything and give God full sway in your life? It's scary. I know I've had different times in my life where I'm closer to God or further away. I've had special days in my life, or special weeks, or special months in my life, where I was so close to God, it just consumed me. And I was just walking around, I felt like I was walking on a cloud. And everywhere I went, people would turn and look at me, and they could see it on me. And it was so close, but it was scary, because I was like, how can I be like this and still make a living? How can I go to work? How can I do the things I have to do every day in this world, walking around on a cloud, feeling the Spirit of God like this? So I don't walk around that way all the time, but it comes and goes, and it's different strengths, you know. I've been feeling it quite a lot this week. But when you ask for a double portion of God's Spirit, you better be ready. You better be ready for some changes in life. That was a bold thing to ask for. And Elijah said to him, you have asked a hard thing. Yet if you can see me as I'm being taken away, it will be for you. But if you don't see me, it will not be. I don't really know why he said that, but that was the thing. So Elisha wanted to make sure he could see Elijah be taken away. And as they went on and talked, behold, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elijah saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. And he saw him no more. So Elisha saw his mentor Elijah taken away in a whirlwind. The chariots of fire came down and separated the two of them. The whirlwind wasn't meant to take Elisha up. So this chariot of fire came down. You know, many times in the Bible, there's a vehicle of some type. In this case, it's described as a chariot of fire. Exactly what it was, it's hard to say, because they didn't have the language in those days to talk about technology. But some kind of vehicle that could fly went between them, and it separated them. And Elijah went straight up to heaven. What a blessing for him. He was so close to God. The other guy that went straight to heaven was Enoch. Enoch's in Genesis, and there's not much said about him. We know that he was a preacher of the gospel, preacher of God's word, and he was so close to God, the Bible said he walked with God. He walked with God, and then one day he was gone. I hope today you're walking with God. I hope you're not afraid to ask for the Spirit of God. You know, sometimes we think that we become a Christian, we give our life to Jesus, it's going to change all our goals, it's going to change everything in our life. All the things that are important to us, we're going to lose them. And you're probably right. But you know, God's got so much better. God's got such a better plan for you than you have for yourself. So many things in my life happen, not because of my plans and schemes, because God opened doors and I just walked through. And I hope you're following the Spirit of God today. It says in the Bible, Jesus said, those that are born of the Spirit are like the wind. You never know where they came from. You never know where they're going. You want to be like the wind today? I pray that you do. I'd like to invite you to come up today and